Blessings, everybody, and welcome back to Luke Part 2. This is lesson number 4 of the first video. We'll be looking at the first few verses of the 21st chapter of Luke. Excuse me there. 21st chapter of Luke is interesting because it deals with a lot of things that you see in parallel Gospels in Matthew 24 and 25 and Mark 13. And there really is big debate as to whether what Jesus is saying in Luke 21 is the same thing as he was saying in Matthew 24 and 25, what is often referred to as the Olivet Discourse. Now, we know a lot of the information is the same, but is he saying it at the same place and at the same time? Or in other words, is it the same account, two different accounts of the same thing that occurred? Or are the two gospel writers telling something that Jesus said at two distinct different times? I can argue in both ways. I really can. It's amazing the amount of detail and information that's here. I think a portion of what we see here in Luke 21 really did address what was about to happen in the near future. You see that with a lot of prophetic things that will happen in the near future, then a further down the road future, and sometimes even a further down the road future. Some people want to come back and say that Luke 21 specifically was addressed for the early church, and that it was all fulfilled by 70 AD or by the end of the first century. Well, that can't be because of some things that you've studied this week, and we'll look at in the next video, the sun, moon, and stars going dark and things like that. And so I just want you to know there is debate about it. We talked about it a good bit in class, but that's really sort of beyond our forum right here together. Well, at the beginning of this 21st chapter, Jesus is there teaching. He's in the temple. That's the setting from the 20th chapter. And he's watching the people. And he's watching people contribute. He's watching rich people give, and he's watching poor people give. And he points out the poor widow because she had given all that she had, apparently all that she had for her sustenance. He points this out and says, look at this right here. Now, I think it's interesting that Luke puts this in this account because what you have is the poor widow right here giving all that she has, Jesus pointing out. And then the very next thing that occurs is that the disciples are coming up pointing out to Jesus saying, hey, look at the temple here. Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it wonderful? Sort of a juxtaposition. They're talking about the beautiful stones and how it was being put together by Herod and all this kind of stuff. And I think Jesus was letting them know there's something a little more important than this. And when you look at Matthew particularly, they do the same type of thing. And he responds to him and says, there's not going to be a stone left unturned from this. I'm sort of the mindset that Jesus might have been saying this and teaching this part right here in Luke 21 and explaining what's happened. Because over in Matthew 24, he says this, and then they go down the Kidron Valley and go over to the Mount of Olives. And then four of the disciples, we find out, come up to Jesus and say, well, tell us, when will these things occur, and what will be the sign of your coming again and of the end of the age? You have a similar kind of question right here in Luke, but Matthew gives you a little more detail. Question I have is, from what did this question arise? Because when you read Matthew, there's really no reason to believe that. Jesus said, okay, these stones are not going to be left unturned. But if that's all he said, then why did they ask the type of question, the way they ask it there in Matthew 24? And I think it's because Jesus had started the dialogue, which Luke gives us right here, in the temple. They left from there, and what we have in Matthew is a fleshing out of that in even greater detail. The stones left unturned literally is what happened in 70 AD and the decades thereafter. And it's sort of interesting because people say, well, the Romans were the ones that destroyed the temple. Yeah, the Romans were the ones that destroyed the temple, and they were the government in charge, but they had mercenaries. And I'm learning more and more about this. I'm nearly believing now, and I think this to be true, that there were mercenaries that actually started the problem in the temple. They actually started to fight, and Titus didn't even know about that. Josephus tells us that General Titus received word that the temple was on fire and that some of his soldiers had rebelled. They were Muslim soldiers that had rebelled and started destroying the temple. I think that's interesting. So they asked Jesus, what's going to be the sign of coming again at the end of the age? He responds in Luke in the same way that he does in Matthew. First thing he says, see to it that you be not misled, because people will come in my name saying that I am he. There will be false Christ, there will be false Messiah. I think it has another understanding too. I think there will be many, many people, and we encounter them all the time, that come in the name of the Lord and say, oh yeah, Jesus is Messiah, Jesus is Lord. They come in his name, and yet they're fraudulent themselves. Okay, keep pressing on. I'll see you again next time, okay? Bye-bye.